In 2015, my family and I visited the Aquarium of the Pacific located in Long Beach, California. We walked through all of the exhibits and we saw what you would expect to see: sea lions, octopus, stingrays, penguins. My son Xander was 12 at the time and my daughter Elle was 8. And they loved touching the small sharks and the cow-nosed rays that swam in the shark lagoon. You see, 3 years earlier, we had lived in the Bahamas, and we loved the ocean, and we loved the sea life that we would see. And everything at the aquarium was just as we expected it to be, until we turned through this hall, dark passageway, and we saw a tank that had a backlit purple hue. And in that tank was something that I had never seen before in my life: a leafy sea dragon. Now, I'd never seen this, and it's a reason why. Because they only live in the wild in a very narrow stretch of ocean in the southern waters of Australia, in a very narrow stretch that I had never been to. So I wasn't surprised that I had never seen it, and that's not what amazed me. And I wasn't even amazed with how beautiful this creature was. But what surprised me was, up until that very second, I had never even imagined that such a creature could exist. Even though when we read the label, it says it was in the same family as a pipefish and a seahorse, well, we can all imagine what those things look like, but I had no idea that a sea dragon really existed. It was beyond my wildest imagination. And the takeaway from me on that very moment was we should all have sea dragon dreams. Dreams that are such an expression of our inner hopes and true feelings and desires that at the very inception of the dream, we not only lack the resources, but we can't even imagine how it could come to be. You see, those are the types of dreams that change communities. Those are the types of dreams that change nations. And in fact, those are the only types of dreams that change the world. You see, when I reflect on my life, I understand that every time I took a practical approach, every time I only went after the thing that I could plan to accomplish and I knew the way, the victories were less satisfying. And that's even true when the victory was exactly what I planned. But every time I stepped out on faith, every time I functioned in what I now know to be a sea dragon dream, well, those victories felt complete. Those victories fed my soul, and those victories built my confidence. You see, for me, I understand that if I'm ever going to do the things that are deeply embedded in me to do, that I've got to take a chance. And so I'm asking you today to join me as a sea dragon dreamer. And there are 3 points that you have to consider, 3 core concepts to this way of thinking. 1, never limit your dreams based on your resources. 2, pursue your dreams even when the very pursuit makes you nervous. And 3, know the difference between an obstacle and a barrier. Never limit your dreams due to a lack of resources. You see, I grew up in the historic West Las Vegas community. I was raised by a loving, God-fearing mother who worked hard. We never went without a warm place to sleep or food to eat. But yet and still, like many people in our community and many Americans across the nation, we struggled with the cost of health care. We struggled with the cost of transportation and other essentials that you need to have your family whole. I remember when my brother and I at different times graduated high school, we faced the same dilemma. How are you going to pay for college tuition? Now, my brother Kyle, 3 years older than me, is a genius. On his test scores alone, he got letters of interest from Stanford University and all these big schools. But when he graduated high school, he joined the Navy. He served honorably for 4 years. And then when he left the Navy, he had odd job after odd job because he could never get the money together so he could see his way to paying tuition. Until 20 years later, he graduated from the local state university. And for me, I didn't do so well in high school. So I went to a small school no one ever heard of when I graduated. It gave me the confidence that I needed. I then was able to apply to my dream school, Morehouse College. And I love the idea of going to the same school where Martin Luther King had graduated from, where Spike Lee had graduated from. And I worked hard and scraped together the $300 so that I could pay to hold my dorm room. And that was exhausting. So after that, I said, man, if it was this hard to get $300 to reserve a room, how am I going to pay for tuition, books, food? How am I going to move to Atlanta? So I walked away, went to the same state university that my brother would later enroll in. Now, no one should misunderstand what I'm saying. Shout out to UNLV, right? That university did me good. But I would be lying to you if I said that it was my dream university. I'd also tell you, fast forward years, my brother and I, although 10 years apart, graduated with our MBA degrees. And at that time, we were both looking as if we were sea dragon dreamers because we enrolled in the schools that we wanted to go to without thought as to how we were going to make the payments. And guess what happened? Different employers decided to pay for each of our MBA degrees, and we were able to graduate debt-free from our master's programs. It just is an example that when you put yourself in the right place, as a sea dragon dreamer, things start to happen. Pursue your dreams even when the very pursuit makes you nervous. You see, everything I've ever done that was worth doing, I was absolutely terrified. When I ran at the age of 27 for state senate in Nevada, with no political experience, fresh out of law school. When I convinced my wife, who's a brilliant attorney, to leave her law firm and come with me to Memphis, Tennessee, because I was hoping to be a vice president of a company. No promises, though. When I decided to enroll at Vanderbilt University's MBA program, Vanderbilt was located in Nashville, Tennessee, 200 miles away from Memphis, Tennessee, where we lived. Absolutely nervous. Each of those steps were the right steps for me at the right time. But perhaps there is no story about pursuing a dream in spite of nerves like the time when I wrote a letter to the Nevada State Bar Association and I told them, hey, this is a notification to withdraw my application to take the bar exam. You see, at that time, Nevada's bar exam was notoriously difficult to pass. And I had completed the background check, completed the 40 detailed questions about my work history and ethics, I had passed all of the requirements, including fingerprints, paid fees, everything you needed to do to take the bar exam. And immediately after I completed my application, I got nervous and I got anxious and I was full of self-doubt until one day I simply couldn't take it anymore. And I wrote this notification that I was withdrawing my application, and here was my formal notice. I would not take the bar exam. I would not do the thing I needed to do to practice law in the state of Nevada. And the next day I go to work. And we know how it is when you go to work and they say, hey, we're going to have a team building day. No one wants to participate. But you're not working, you guys sit and listen to somebody's talk. Okay, let's have at it. One of the exercises that they did was they broke us up into small groups, and you were supposed to ask your coworkers serious questions about your career. And then they were going to give you a response. I thought this was a total waste of time until the two people who went before me asked exceptionally serious questions about their careers. So I said, well, okay, I'll ask a real question. Imagine this. I asked a group of non-lawyers who had never gone to law school, never intended to take the bar exam, what bar exam should I take? Because, mind you now, after I wrote the notification that I wasn't going to be in Nevada, I went to the little book, I found the state with the highest bar passage rate, and I said, that's where I'm going to go. Even though I didn't want to live there, I didn't know anybody there, I didn't want to practice law there, it just seemed like the safe bet. And so they responded with a question. My coworkers said, well, Uri, if you were not afraid, which state would you take the bar exam in? And it was clear. I would take Nevada's bar exam. And so I left the training, just walked out. Honest story. Went back to my cubicle. I called the Nevada State Bar examiners, and I said, hey, this is Uri Clinton. Did you get my notification? I want to withdraw my notification to withdraw the application. And the lady on the other line starts laughing. She says, Uri Clinton? I said, yes, I'm Uri Clinton. She says, you're Uri Clinton? I said, yes, I'm Uri Clinton. And she says, you know what? Your notification to withdraw is right before me right now. Had you waited one more minute, I would have processed it, and you would have been required under the rules to wait until next year to take the bar exam. Whew, dodged a bullet. So I go back to real life, though. So now I'm studying for an exam that I can't imagine how I could ever pass. But I use the fear and the anxiety and the self-doubt as fuel. And I study harder and longer and harder and longer than I had ever studied for any exam ever. And before you know it, it was test day. And I took the exam. And I didn't just pass, I passed with gusto. And here is a funny story for you guys. 1998, I had never gone online to look up anything. And someone called me and said, hey, if you go on the internet, which was a thing back then, right? If you go on the internet, they have a list of everybody that passed. So there wasn't Google. I type in the web address of the state bar, and there's a list of everyone who passed the bar that year. And when I got down to the C's, there was Clinton, Uri. I had passed the bar exam. I yelled so loud at my desk that security comes running in. And they say, what's going on? And I say, no, it's just a cry of joy. That is an example of, even though you're nervous, because in real life you're nervous, you've got to pursue your dreams. That is what a sea dragon dreamer does. never confuse obstacles for barriers. Now, by design, a barrier is intended to be permanent, impenetrable. It's supposed to stop progress. An obstacle, on the other hand, still problematic, but by design is temporary. It just simply slows progress. We sometimes mistake obstacles for barriers. And when we see a barrier, we simply give up. When we see an obstacle, we make the mistake of changing our objective to accommodate the obstacle. I will tell you, in my life, I was in special education in elementary school. I taught myself to read with confidence around the 7th grade. I was a pitifully poor test taker. ACT, 12. LSAT, 142. You sign your name, and these are the scores that they give you as pity. They were obstacles to my dreams, but they were not barriers. Because the reality is that every time in my career, in my life, I've wanted to do something, I've been able to overcome the obstacles. When I wanted to be vice president of a Fortune 500 company, I didn't even know how they selected vice presidents. But 5 months after my MBA, I was appointed vice president of legal affairs for the Central Division of a Fortune 500 company. When I wanted to be general counsel of a publicly traded company, I had another obstacle because I couldn't explain how a young attorney with only 5 years of corporate experience would ever be taken seriously for a general counsel position. But there I was at 35, appointed chief legal officer, corporate secretary, and chief compliance officer for a highly regulated public company. When I decided that I wanted to pursue international transactions, I had never left the country. In fact, I didn't get a passport till I was around 32 years old. But in the last 14 years, I've done hundreds of millions of dollars in international transactions. I've led negotiations with governments and government entities from Asia, Central America, and the Caribbean. And yes, when I decided that I wanted to transition out of corporate law and into an executive leadership role, I didn't know anyone personally who had ever done it, who could tell me how to get it done. But I managed to become senior vice president of global development for a Fortune 500 company, and most recently named president and COO of a newly acquired subsidiary that last year did over $600 million in revenue. And what I'm trying to explain to you now is that we are all given the same gifts by God. We all have this inner desire, the thing that we're so embarrassed about because we can't imagine how it could exist, that we don't tell our friends, we don't tell our family. And I'm telling you today that I still have sea dragon dreams to achieve. And I'm asking you to join me, look into your inner self. Don't limit your dreams based on your resources. Pursue your dreams even when you're nervous. And yes, know the difference between obstacles and barriers. Please join me and become Sea Dragon Dreamers. Thank you.